Damien Green looked up at the message screen of the bus he was travelling on through the streets of Brussels. He wanted to get off at the next stop, so eased himself out of his seat and stood in front of the exit door. He pushed the blue button at the side of the door to signal the driver that he wanted to get off. The bus came to a halt, the doors opened, and he stepped out into the street. The journey by public transport was a long one for Damien, requiring one tram journey, the Brussels metro, and then finally this last bus ride. 1.5 hours it had taken him, and that was the connections fitting seamlessly together. Still, after the long journey, he was here now. He still missed not having a car. He had sold his top-of-the-range BMW a couple of years ago because he simply didn't need it anymore. Normally, he didn't miss it, but when he was required to take a long journey by public transport, he missed the ease of simply being able to get into a car and drive to his destination. Still, he thought, it doesn't mean that I don't have to worry about drinking. It was Friday afternoon and the air was warm. The sun was shining and he was looking forward to a convivial evening. He was visiting an old friend, Ian. They had originally met over 10 years ago when they were both relatively new to Brussels and working for the British government. They had briefly shared an apartment together until Damien had got a better offer and moved on. Over the years they had lost contact. However, a recent tragedy and ill health had brought the two of them back together again, renewing their friendship. As long-term British expats living in Belgium, they still had a lot in common. Damien was still in his 40s and had been living in Brussels since the 1990s. He had originally come over from England to work for an American company, which lasted for a number of years. The placement with the company had been arranged through the British Foreign Office, using their ties to the USA and their special relationship. The American company knew nothing of this and simply thought of him as a contract computer programmer, which he was, a good programmer, having learned his skills at the British Surveillance Organisation, GCHQ. He had tried to move back to the UK, but had found, like so many expats, that he no longer felt at home in his own country. Another job offer had brought him back to Brussels. When that finished, he decided to make his home in Belgium. As he told friends, he had just forgotten to go home. Damien winced as he walked slowly along the streets towards Ian's house. Age was now catching up on him, and he cursed his ailing body. He had once been tall, slim, and athletic. He still had a good body, and a summer tan had enhanced his good looks. Piercing blue eyes and dark, closely cropped hair also added to the attraction. People had always found him attractive. Unfortunately, he didn't always find them attractive. He had a narrow sense of who he liked and didn't like. Those he would like and get into bed with, and those that didn't really move him at all. And yes, he thought to himself, I am still good looking. Good clothes also helped. He had known a number of fashion designers and models over the years. The one thing they had always told him was that it was not what you wear, but how you wear it. He could still look good in a t-shirt and a pair of tight jeans. His stomach, though, was beginning to become a problem as he aged. He was beginning to expand over his waistline. Something must be done about that, he thought as he walked to the streets. Perhaps tomorrow. Now, a long-time back injury had left him struggling to walk. Normally, he would ignore the pain, but today, for some reason, it felt worse than usual. It was a recurring problem, and although he tried to hide it, sometimes a flash of pain would streak up his back, causing him to falter. Lifting objects was always a problem, and he tried to avoid heavy lifting whenever possible. Not that it was required to do very often. He could afford to pay someone else to do that if he needed. Ian was usually good company when he was not in a bad mood. Ian liked his food and his wine and generally had something to say on most topics. He was living on his own now and appeared to be enjoying the experience. Now in his mid-60s, he had an interesting life. However, sudden inheritance had provided him with the financial means to be able to indulge his needs and his likes. He was able to indulge himself wherever and whenever he wanted. He was now a man of leisure and was determined to make the most of it while he had the opportunity. Damien walked slowly up to the door of his house and rang the bell. A large, rotund man with a grey beard answered the door. Ian was an imposing man who had a style that had suited him. His Scottish accent only served to enhance his appearance. He was wearing and appeared in his usual brown tweed jacket and patterned waistcoat. As he was at home, he had worn his usual loud tie that he often had around his neck. His white shirt was open at the first button. "I thought you were going to text me when you arrived," he said in a grumpy voice. "Sorry," Damien replied. "I forgot. The bus was crowded." "Okay. Come in," Ian replied, leaving the door open and walking down the short corridor towards the back of the house. "I have some bearing. Come," he said, trying to attract Ian's attention. Ian had disappeared by now. "I have come bearing gifts," Ian called after the retreating figure. By this time, Ian had disappeared into the back of the house. "I hope it's good wine," a voice called from the other room. "Not that usual crap you bring." "I hope not," replied Damien. "It costs me enough. Anyway, I have a good taste for wine." He closed the door behind him and followed the narrow corridor into the back of the house. "That's what you think," came the reply from Ian. "I remember that supermarket crap you tried to push on us a couple of years ago. My taste buds, they're still having to recover."